Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Just a quick reminder that I do giveaways every single week, so if you're interested and don't know how to enter, just stay tuned until later in the video and I'll tell you exactly how to enter. That said, our first malicious compliance story of the day is by Mugu007. Guy from work tried to undermine me, but I quit a week ago. This happened only a month ago, so the memory of the incident is fresh. I got accepted into college and had to quit my job of 2 years. I put up my resignation papers and had 2 months of notice period left. I had informed my manager and team, but didn't account for Mr. S, who was technically on my team, but worked from the client offices overseas, so I don't get to see him ever. Background on Mr. S. He was hired as a mediator between the client and us, but had years of technical experience, so he often helped us out with the technical work, but was always a snob about it. He made sure to CC every possible manager and every mail to show that he was doing a lot more than his role was required to do. Everyone hated how commanding and rude he was. Most meetings with him were just the entire team listening to him complain and moan for 20 minutes. He had no boundaries and would call up at odd hours of the night just to prove his point. He would promise clients certain results with unreasonable timelines without consulting the team, leading to late delivery and terrible client ratings. Since I had 2 months left to go at work, I wasn't quick to give up responsibilities and transfer knowledge to my colleagues. I handled an important client-facing task and I've been doing it for the 2 years I worked there. I never taught it to anyone else cause it was a relatively easy task and it hasn't been screwed up in 2 years. We get info from the client that my task was undergoing major upgrades and needed to be done extra carefully and on priority for the next week. I know the drill and get to work as usual. Mr. S calls me up on Skype to re-emphasize the importance of the task this week. I just reply to him that I've been following all protocols every week and will continue the same as usual, being careful of the upgrades. He considers my answer as unprofessional and inconsiderate and proceeds to tell me how I'm not that important to the team and my job was easily replaceable. He then cut the call and proceeded to reassign all my tasks for the next 2 months to someone else, while also formally emailing everybody that no new tasks were to be assigned to me. There I sat, maliciously complying, watching my teammates struggle to run my task, unable to help. I sat around doing nothing for the last 2 months of my job. Luckily, I was working from home, so that meant 2 months of paid leave. Let me ask you guys, do any of you guys consider yourselves busybodies that constantly need some kind of work to really feel satisfied, or are you the kind of person that would just love 2 months of paid free time to do whatever you want? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Techsupportvictim. It's below the knee. Company I worked for made us wear official logoed shirts, but the waist down was our choice within reason. No ripped stuff, no jeggings/leggings, no sagging, skirts have to be below the knee, shorts had to touch the knee when standing. Then we get a new district manager who up and decides that shorts aren't professional looking enough. In summer, during a bit of a heat wave. All the guys on staff protested, but the regional manager upheld that the district manager had the right to change the dress code. One of the ladies on staff had a husband that worked for a local theater company in the costume department, so he, with some coworkers, whipped up some slightly longer than normal utility kilts for any men on staff who wanted one, which they all went for. Fast forward a couple of weeks and the district manager shows up to see our gents in their finest, tries to write them up, until one of the guys pulls out the dress code and points out that it doesn't say anything about only ladies wearing skirts. Merely that skirts had to fully cover the knees and theirs did. If you're working in a hot environment, you need to be able to allow your employees to wear something that's suitable for that environment. It doesn't matter how professional something is, if they're going to get heat stroke or always constantly be overheated or sweaty or whatnot, they're not going to be happy with their job. That's why I keep my dress code professional but comfortable, as you can clearly see. Okay, maybe you can't. This next story is by Unique Harmony 7. Boss tries to fire me, I end up with 2 weeks paid vacation and she loses her job. So this happened several years ago at a company that I worked for. I was hired into a position there and worked for a woman we shall call Carol. She was the worst manager I'd ever worked for. She really knew very little about the department, couldn't figure out how to read or generate reports to show our department statistics, and was way more concerned with being everyone's friends than their boss. I was very good at the administrative side of things, and although it wasn't my job, she eventually got me to start writing her reports for her that she would present at the weekly management meeting with all the department heads. To create and evaluate new sales campaigns, even conducting interviews and writing up employees who got into trouble. Basically, I started doing her job for her. And all the while, she promised me that there would be a new opening soon in a higher position and that all the extra work I was doing would be how she would justify to the higher-ups that I should get it. Well, naturally, my own duties occasionally got pushed aside in favor of the super urgent things she had me doing for her. One day, her boss's boss was doing a walkthrough of our department and called me out for some poor productivity on my accounts. Instead of explaining to him that I actually had permission to scale back on my daily accounts in favor of my new responsibilities, she proceeded to ream me out in front of everyone and promised him that it would be handled. I realized then that everything she told me was a lie. I stopped doing her work for her and focused on my own and went back to being the highest producer in the department, which I had also been before my new duties. She got upset and tried to write me up for disobedience when I told her I wouldn't come in early and do extra work for her again. That was my last straw. I sent her an email with my 2 weeks notice and CC'd my personal email account so I'd have a copy of it. She replied, "Received." She sat there all morning huffing and puffing and eventually pulled me into the side room and told me to hand in my keys and leave right then, that she wasn't going to pay me for 2 more weeks when I wouldn't do what she said. No problem. I maliciously complied because what she didn't realize was that when an employee gives their 2 weeks notice and you fill the position or ask them to leave before that time is up, you still have to pay them out. So I basically got 2 free weeks of pay that I didn't have to work for. The GM of the company was on vacation that week, and when he got back, he was pissed that the highest producer was gone. He asked her what happened and she lied about what had happened and said I was grossly insubordinate and that's why I had to leave that day. Unfortunately, over the next 6 months, the department went downhill so badly that her job was on the line. She reached out to me to see if I would come back and help her fix it. I said I would if she apologized, gave me a raise and some other perks. She agreed, but when she went to HR to get the contract written up, the GM blocked it and said they would never rehire someone who was let go for being grossly insubordinate. She couldn't admit the truth, so I didn't return. Last I heard, she was fired shortly after. I think my only comment is, why wouldn't OP take some of this stuff to HR and see if they couldn't get some of this figured out? Because I feel like OP had a very solid case here, and they could have presented some very strong proof to HR and got the ball rolling, and maybe, if they were lucky, ended up with their manager's position and their manager being gone. Our next story is by 3 Pelican. This isn't just admin, it's part of your job. When I first graduated university, I got a job at an agency doing client work. Specifically, I worked on a multi-year, multi-million-pound contract with massive amounts of data, lots of deadlines, and plenty of pressure. Early on in the job, I started having some health issues and have to have a few regular appointments. On those days, I had to work from home and my line manager signed it off, and I always met my deadlines. But my project manager would call me up every couple of hours with some asking what I was doing under the guise of having a question about the project. He knew the answers, he'd been on the project for a decade. Eventually, he expressed concerns about my productivity and timekeeping, basically because he lacked the object permanence to believe I was working if he couldn't see me. He went on sabbatical in the end, but warned his temporary replacement that I was troublesome and not to be relied on. She called a meeting early on and said I would have to be closely supervised, and she wanted detailed updates about my time management and workload every day. This went on for a while, and she continually accused me of forgetting things that I had actually done and holding me to higher standards than everyone else. I just did what any reasonable person would do and made sure she was filled in on progress towards deadlines. Not too much detail, just keeping her up to date. This wasn't enough for her. One day she called me in and told me, if you would just communicate, then I might be able to trust you. So I decided to communicate the heck out of everything I did. I started keeping an extremely detailed to-do list with color coding and priority scores and called her every day to catch up about my work for the day. Every time I started a new task, I would let her know I was about to do XYZ, and then I would email her again when it was done. We had to keep timesheets to charge time to different client projects. My time as a junior was worth a certain amount to the company, and any time I spent on project-related work was charged at an hourly rate. But admin work was not chargeable to a particular client and came from a central company fund. In the midst of all this, I asked my project manager whether I should just list this work as admin or whether it was chargeable. Typically, managing to-do lists and calendars was considered admin. She said it was disrespectful of me to consider working with her as admin and that I should charge it to the project. The catch is, all this was taking hours. A couple weeks down the line, she called me up while I was working at home and begged me to stop because it was costing the project too much money and performance on profit targets had tanked. That, and it was costing her too much of her own time to keep up with my compliance with her micromanagement. I resigned pretty quickly after that and reported her for workplace bullying right before I left. Last I heard was she had to go on additional management training and received a warning from HR. So one manager doesn't like them, gives them a simple tip that they're troublesome and not to be relied on, and the new manager has this complete bias against OP and going to great lengths to make their job unnecessarily harder when they were already achieving everything that they had to do. Obviously, pretty ridiculous. This next story is by boomshiki. Free excused on any assignment? Deal! This comes from my grade 8 year at an alternate education high school. I grew up with a dry wit that was hard to appreciate. Norm Macdonald would get me. My teachers never seemed to get me. Eventually, I got passed off to this alternate education school for the remainder of my education, a place where teachers were trained in psychological warfare, the kind of school where you have a single teacher who teaches all subjects. My teacher was the super hip mid-20s female that went by her first name and aspired to be Michelle Pfeiffer from Dangerous Minds. She was notorious for making deals and always keeping her word. Once a month, she had a contest of sorts for a free pass. The best book report wins kind of thing. The pass was good for an excused on any assignment. I ended up winning one, which got me thinking how to best use it. I ended up with a brilliant plan. I tried my very best every time a free pass was on the line. I ended up doing all sorts of stuff I've never done before. I studied, I prepared, I did homework, anything to get these passes. It was absolutely essential that I kept a B average, so the habits came naturally. By the end of the year, I had 4 passes. My teacher kept asking when I would be using the passes, but I kept them saved. With a week left in the school year, I approached her and informed her that I planned to use my excused for my exams. She looked at me for an eternity of stunned silence before saying very politically, "I'll see what we are allowed to do." She pulled me aside the next day and told me that I wasn't allowed to skip my provincial exams because it's beyond the school's authority, but I could skip the others. Since I only had 2 provincial exams, it was a clear victory. That's the story of how I skated onto the B honor roll on a technicality. It's also the story of how my teacher mind-freaked reverse psychologied me into putting an effort into my education. I guess there's a method to the madness. Even for OP who normally didn't do these kinds of things, it got them participating and doing stuff they've never done before. So although they really abused the system, it got them doing stuff that normally they would never do. It might be a win, but they also kind of just used it to skate by, so I don't know how much of a win it actually is for the teachers. Our next story is by Chuck Rando. Leave the door open. I have a cajon. One day in 7th grade, my mother checked in on me. After she was done, she did what I hate most. Cracked the door just the slightest amount. I mumbled, "Close the door." And she practically bursts in, goes off on this rant about how she's sick of the door being closed all the time. She tells me in that voice, "You know what I'm talking about. Leave the door open," and walks away. I simply smile, walk over to my cajon, basically a box that you sit on and drum on, and go to town. Needless to say, I'm allowed to close my door again. There's nothing quite like a little bit of percussive compliance to make sure they really understand why you should be allowed to close your door. So quickly now, I want to explain just how to enter the giveaway. All you need to do is leave a comment on this video relevant to something you saw or heard or liked in any story in that video. That's it, you're entered. But it applies to every single video we upload this week. So to get the best odds at winning the $30 Amazon gift card giveaway, you'll want to leave a comment relating to any of those videos all week long. On Sunday, after the last video has gone out, I'll pick one comment at random and let you know on the following Monday who has won, and then it starts all over again. So make sure you leave a relevant comment on this video and additionally every video I upload this week for the absolute best chance to win. And while you're at it, why don't you go ahead and give the videos a like too, because it helps more than you could imagine. That said, our final story of the day is by Griffin for War. Boss turns my snow day into a snow week. The light ensues. I worked for a restaurant chain during college. One winter, we had a big snowstorm and I was effectively snowed in at my apartment. My car at that time was a POS and couldn't make it up the incline of my driveway for me to get out. I could walk to the gas station to get supplies, but otherwise, I was stuck. I called my boss to the restaurant to tell him what's going on and that I wouldn't be able to make it into work that evening. Our exchange went a little like this. "Hey boss, I'm snowed into my apartment and I can't make it into work this evening."
Are you serious? You're gonna do this to me tonight of all nights?
It was a Friday night. Sorry, I don't want to, but I literally can't drive out of my apartment driveway.
Can't you just walk to work?
It's like 5 miles and it's 10 below zero. I'm not doing that.
Well, if that's the kind of work ethic you're bringing here, then why don't you take the rest of the week off?
Really? Because that would be great. Thanks, boss. After this, I hung up and ignored all calls from my boss. I spent the week playing Skyrim and enjoyed myself immensely. A few of my coworkers called asking where I was, but I explained to them that I was snowed in at my apartment and that our boss had given me the week off. After a week, I called my boss and asked him if he'd like me to come back in and work some shifts. His only response was a very tired,
"Yeah, that'd be nice."
Things went back to normal after that, and there was no friction between me and my boss, but I will always think back to that week with fondness. Honestly, I feel like in a lot of places, unless you were a very essential worker to the company, you might get a pretty hardcore reaming for pulling something like that when they're obviously being sarcastic about what they're saying. Thankfully, OP didn't and their boss accepted it. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which one and why in the comment section down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving the video a like and subscribe if you haven't and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you did, whether it was just watching the video or commenting, subscribing, whatever you do. Thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. Any single thing you do helps the channel grow that much more and I appreciate the heck out of it. I hope you all have a wonderful day and until next time, I'll be right here on the Storytime channel.